a little bit unexpected. So I'm going to look at the video through the Zoom meeting. And hopefully
Okay.
I can, edit this afterwards, something like that. And because I want to see the comments that are going on. Edison, Denise, yeah, Heidi, hello everyone. It was a wacky start, but I hope that this is going to become interesting very fast. And hopefully I will be able to manage this thing afterwards. And I'll also be aware for the people that are watching right now is that there is some kind of delay because Kayla and I, we are doing this through Zoom. And I see that you guys are commenting, and that's something that it shows up later. I don't know how long it takes. I think it's about 60 seconds. So, hello. I'm here with Kayla Green. As many as you know, she's the writer, editor-in-chief of the Raw Society magazine, among other things, because you are kind of the version of Christelle in the States. So you're the chief, you're the boss. And we, the men, try to follow as best as we can. But one of the things that I wanted to do this live video, especially because I want to have this conversation for everyone to enjoy and to learn something about the mix of writing and photography, which is one of the things that, in my opinion, is the most valuable skill that you're going to have to add to your photography skills is the ability to write, to explain yourself in a way that makes sense and it's interesting and it's dynamic. But also I wanted for some people that is joining with us in this live session to ask some questions. So I believe that it would be very cool if we can go into the conversation. I have some questions to ask you because you are not only a writer, journalist, and an editor-in-chief, you manage several newspapers. So I understand that with that in mind, you have to be aware of what you look for example, in a new photographer you might hiring, right? And that kind of thing. And if all the things that I believe that a good photographer needs to have as a skills, as a mindset, I believe that you might be aware of those things. And then how, as photographers in this new age of, Substack and social media and all that stuff, in which we are going to work more and more with smaller newspapers and publications and companies, and everything is way more direct. Therefore, that's one of the reasons I have been in this crusade for the last couple of years, trying to tell to people that, look, you have to build your own thing, your own ecosystem to try to reach as many people as you can as well. People like yourself, Kayla. So you might get a couple of emails after this. But being able to pull off a story, some kind of story, with words and photography all together to make it more appealing, more interesting, more on point. So yeah, I would guess that this would be the first part of these questions that I have a lot, because it excites me a lot, this whole combination of tools. So what would you look for in a photographer when you have to hire someone for your newspapers? Do you tend to be I know that you have writers and journalists, so you have different positions for a photographer and a journalist, but do you believe that it's important to at least, have some kind of skill with writing, even for a photographer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the papers that I work at and that I have worked out in, what we call community journalism. So they're largely, not necessarily just that they're short staffed, but it's a smaller newsroom and no one only does one job. And so everyone has to be able to, whether it's reporters have to be able to pick up a camera and shoot photos, that we can use, or the other way around. I think that if we're able to hire photographers who can do their own reporting and writing, that's a huge bonus. But even at the very base level, having a photographer can be very talented and, on the photography side, and they can give us a really good portfolio when they apply and have a great resume. But at the very base level, if they can't write good cut lines, if I'm having to go in and edit every cut line they put in, or, if they don't they're, again, the very basics of just knowing how to spell people's names correctly or how to explain what's happening just in a basic cut line. Then, I don't really care how talented you are as a photographer. If I'm having to go in and fix all of your work, then I just, again, I'm on a small staff and community newspapers, I just don't really have time for that. So, you can kind of start as that's the most basic level of what I need our photographers to do. And at the highest level, they have opportunities to do their own reporting and researching for stories that they find of interest, and they can write their own stories. So they don't necessarily even have to work with a writer, especially if it's something that they find of interest. They can create that entire story by themselves, which some people would think that's rewarding. Some people might want to just do the photography and collaborating with a writer. But either way, you definitely have to be able to write at that most basic level, and then you can kind of expand there into what type of storytelling you want to do. And the more you can do that, the more opportunities you'll have.
And I would say, because we have a community that it's heavy on the street photography side, right? So you come from the journalist and journalism, and I understand that to be precise and to have the skill that it's to even to do how you call it. I'm going to look very bad right now, very unprofessional. Under the picture, you have to code the what's going on when you file the pictures to.
Yeah, just all that the data and what you're filing.
Yeah, all the captioning and all that stuff needs to be within the photojournalism world in a very specific way, right? For different reasons. But going back to the idea that many in our community are what we call street photographers, let's say. But at the same time, if there is something that I see that it comes back every time, is that when you are already in a phase of your photography in which you already had fun doing stuff, going out and taking cool pictures, single stuff, is when you start to think about doing long form projects. And that can be a little bit more abstract than for the journalism, but nevertheless, I believe that the architecture of a story, it's always similar, let's say, right? It can be, I would like for you to explain this new journalism and the way of writing that I find fascinating, because I think that there is overlapping with the way that we photograph now. This mixing kind of impressions and a little bit based on real events kind of deal and all that stuff. But the point is that once you want to develop some kind of long form story, even if it's a little bit more abstract, which is fine, because I always say that the point is to say something. And in the communities, in the street photography community, we tend to look inwards a little bit too much, and it becomes Instagram things and Instagram contests, and it's quite endogamic. But the point of being a photographer and documenting real life and being out there taking pictures of people is to explain something, right? And if you put that in a context of long form, that means you have something to say. And how you put that together, I think it's the best way, in my opinion, and I might be romantic with it, it's always has been the writing and the photography, these two essay forms. I think that they go together very well. So even for the people, you know that I ramble a little bit, but people that watches this channel, they know that I ramble a little bit, so I think that everybody's okay with that. Keeping that in mind, I would say that when people want to evolve as authors, as photographers, and they start to imagine themselves being professional, for example, it's easy not to know what that means, right? What it means to be a professional photographer, a professional street photographer. That's very strange. That's why at the beginning, I think that we were talking about having these tools to reach people. But the first part of that would be to go away from the idea of talking to other photographers and start talking to an audience, whatever that is, right? And start to build up from there. The tools. I'm a great fan of doing open stories, things that usually are not very specific as newsworthy, but nevertheless, I find them intriguing. to explain in a long form. And I believe that I use visually what you call new journalism, which is this very strange and very cool way of writing that, if you can, I would love you to explain.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think when you're talking about, starting to not just talk to photographers, but to an audience, or to, to someone who might read or see your project, we think about that in the same way, whether it's, we're writing a hard news journalism story, or whether it's more, feature writing and some of that new journalism that I'll kind of get into in a minute. But you have to be able to explain your story in, on the written side to someone who probably has no idea what the topic's about. So you can't, it's not like inside baseball, right? We learn in journalism that everything you talk about has to be, whether you can explain it to your grandmother, or to a middle school student, being able to take something um, that's often really complex, or maybe very nuanced, or maybe it's, just talking about, again, we go to a lot of like local government council meetings, being able to, whether it's describe that to someone who has no idea what's going on, but it still is important to them, or whether you are going into that more kind of, abstract, or kind of telling the story of a scene that's happening. It can apply to both. So I definitely understand that, and just being able to describe what's happening to someone who is, who's never maybe heard of this story before. Um, and then, on the other side of that, I also think it's, you might have this great story, and you might have this complete project, and you're ready to, bring it somewhere. And, even if you write the story well, if you can't, that kind of gets into pitching, which I'm sure we can talk about later at some point. But, if you can't describe your story, if you can't pitch it well, whether it's, just a caption or whether it's an email, then if no one's interested in listening to that, then you're not going to even be able to tell that story in the end. So, yeah, so new journalism is a concept that's been around for a few decades, but it's essentially the concept of you're kind of putting yourself into the situation, or putting yourself into the story, and acknowledging that, either that you are subjectively experiencing the story, and that you do have something to say, right? You're not just sitting there and saying, 50 cars passed by today, and these are the numbers for what's happening. It's really creating the world, what I like to say is outside of the frame. So you're explaining what's going on, not just in the who, what, when, where, but more of the why of what's happening, and it's using a lot of descriptions. I like to take notes and write and describe all of my senses. So you're really trying to take the reader into what is happening, and what it feels like, and what the experience is like in that moment. So you can kind of, rather than, like, photography is, you're preserving something that's happened in the past, right? So you kind of, if you think about the writing in the same way, you're trying to bring someone back into like what that setting is like, and why it's important, and how it impacts people, and how you interact with the scene. So it's using a lot of descriptions again, and you can really let your voice and your tone be personalized in how you tell those stories. And so I think there's a lot of different tools and ways that you can story tell rather than just explain what happened.
So there is nothing wrong, I would say, with this idea of making noticeable that you have experienced the thing, whatever you want to explain, right? So
Mhm.
you still can be somewhat objective, but still show somehow, make people feel that you were there. So that's important to me, because of course, with photography that's a little bit easier, because there is no other way. A photographer needs to be there to do it, right? And of course you frame in certain ways, you put yourself there, of the same, right? In sense of opinions, and your point of view, your way of seeing, um, and that has been usually tricky to navigate, because, well, it's very related to the idea of the truth, the picture, and it's not really. I would say that it's close to, if the photographer is honest, there's this trait of veracity, if you want, because you were there. I mean, no matter how wacky or strange you frame, or you try to avoid certain things, you're still there. Therefore, you are putting your opinion through that, you know, process of framing and composing specific ways, and then editing in a specific way as well. But with writing, sometimes if you, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you are a little bit too opinionated, let's say, with whatever is going on, it feels that it feels more opinionated than what it might be. I don't know if I am making sense with that, right? So how to maintain a sense of narrative and storytelling, and make the writing and the explanation of something that you want to explain interesting, because I think that that's the great thing that happens with this new journalism. It's that it feels more relatable, but also I think it can fall into this round of saying, okay, there's a little bit of bias here. So how you know manage all that stuff?
Yeah, I think there's a difference in putting your opinion or your own experience into a story and trying to tell people what to think about it. You can, there's different ways of, or different perspectives of how any situation can happen. If you're standing there and taking a photo, you don't necessarily get into that. But, if there's, some type of confrontation or something happening between two groups of people, or, between people and land, you can kind of decide how you felt in that situation, and whether you're going to tell the story and set, the perspective from what group of people, or, from what point of view. it, it's not necessarily saying that I have an opinion about the entire topic, and this is what it is and this is what you have to think, but it's kind of creating that scene, and how, thinking about how it made you feel and trying to recreate that so that you can present still facts and truth to it. If something's that is happening, you don't want to change any of that truth or any of those facts, whether it's based in research or whether you're there and talking to people. But it's adding that sense of place, and people can decide whether they emotionally connect with that or not, based on how you're explaining, um, how something smells when you're there, and if whether that's positive or negative, and that's how you kind of create your opinion. But it's not an opinion based on changing any type of fact or anything that actually happened. It's more just on kind of creating that setting.
Yeah.
And it's
So
and yeah, I mean, and it's kind of, it can be a fine line, but I think that's why, you can use specific tools, and whether you talk to more people or not, or whether you're just kind of a fly on the wall. And I think that different topics deserve different tools and different types of attention. So the harder or more serious, or, more traditionally journalistic the topic is, you don't necessarily want to describe how the flowers felt or smelled, in something that's a really serious situation. So that's why there's a lot of tools that you can use in this new journalism, writing toolbox. And it takes, just being able to interpret the situation and look at it. That's what you look at subjectively, because then you can decide what the type of feeling is that you want to convey. It's not just applying the same type of, you know, uh, standard, template to everything. I think that's where, and you creating the story, I think, is where you can be really subjective with it. But you still want to tell the truth, obviously, and you still, you can't change any facts about what's happening.
okay, so I think I think I understand more. Um, so as some of the people know, we did this workshop of writing and photography in Morocco. You were the teacher. Everybody was very happy with it, me included, because I think it's fantastic. And one of the things that you were saying was to use all the senses, right? And I think that now I'm understanding how you can evoke certain things still in a sense of being truthful, because if it's cold or hot or it smells funny or whatever it is that you want to incorporate to the story, that's feeling driven, that doesn't take out any fact, right? And
Right. Yeah.
is that, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking of, from Morocco, I'm thinking of two people's stories they use different, very different experiences, and in their own background, right? Because we also we have to think about what our biases and coming into a situation, and how we might feel based on what we've already experienced or know about a place. So the two stories I'm thinking of that kind of um, are good comparisons to each other would be, so Jackie, she's on this right now, but Jackie, wrote about, it was her first time there, and she wrote about how uh, Marrakesh was just very, it felt very overwhelming at first, and she thought about, when she stood there, the senses that came to her were about the noise and the hustle and bustle and like all of the different people and how crowded it was. And so she then ended up writing, and again, everyone's standing there, in the same city for a week, taking in theory the same photos, or they're the photos that they're taking are of the same types of people and situations. But her writing came out in to tell that story of like that busyness. And so she used more like she talked or wrote more about sound and sight, and to really demonstrate the hustle and bustle of the Medina. And then I think, someone like Carlos, who wrote, he kind of created this narrative that was a very personal interaction between two people. And so he focuses a lot on, lightness and dark. And he, his photos talk a lot about, he's a shadow a lot and light in his photos. And so I think that the narrative that he then wrote was talking about more emotions and people interacting, in that, trying to find a lightness and darkness within yourself. So, they were walking around the same places all week, but they reacted to the situation or to the scene that they were experiencing in a very different way, just based on, how they, again, what they were feeling coming into it, and then what the scene or the feeling that they wanted to convey. And so they focused on different things in their writing, even though they were looking at the same thing.
Right. Yeah. It was eye-opening, to be honest, to see what people did there, because we were what, 5 or 6 people, and everybody did something very different, very interesting, very truthful of their own experience, of course, but it was incredible. Um, One of the things that tends to happen, because I've been trying to tell to the members of the society and anybody that wants to listen, to be honest, is that you know going back to this idea of your own audience is to create some kind of Substack or a newsletter form that goes beyond the Instagram thing, which is very fast and not great for developing any kind of voice. And what I've seen that happens a lot is that we tend to fall into the description, which is what you can see in the picture, basically, right? It's easy to fall into that because, of course, for us as photographers, it's quite interesting. The process of doing pictures is why we do it. It's very intriguing. It's very specific. It's something that every photographer that is listening to this, they understand what I'm talking about, because it's a way of being somewhere. It's doing pictures, right? It's hard to avoid. Therefore, when we have the task of writing about it, we tend to fall into that, into writing about the photography, right? Even talking about the process of photography, which is not interesting for everyone. And so if it's not, the description of what you can see in the picture, which is fine if there is some kind of detail that it's hard to see, it falls into, well, this picture was difficult to make because whatever reason, right? Which can be cool for me as photographer, but for everyone that is not a photographer, and this is what we have to try to really push in the community, and everybody, every photographer, is to try to be better authors, in the sense that, again, we are not talking to other photographers. You can keep Instagram for that, right? So how would you say that would be a good idea to start, for example, avoiding falling into the same thing all the time, to falling into, I want to write about my experience in Istanbul and I'm going to explain what settings I'm using in the camera, for example, something like that, which is not important whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that just kind of again expanding outside of that frame is a good place to start with that. If a photo was hard to get, why? Was it because the people were combative, or was it because, it was, I don't know, it was really dark out, or, some other setting. So, what is happening, you can still kind of set that scene of, this was a hard moment to capture, but not because of, my difficulties in the settings, or anything like that. But, but again, you take a photo, but what is happening physically and literally outside of what that photo captured. So, again, that's kind of coming into describing a place, describing that sense of place. And I think you can set that scene up and kind of get to the same point, but without being so without using, so much jargon, and appealing to people who are not just photographers.
Yeah, one of the things that you said in the workshop that blew my mind, and it's simple as fuck, but I think that it was brilliant, is that I said, I believe, or someone said, it was noisy, it was very loud, and you said, what do you mean by loud? What was that? It was because of the bikes, because of the people that are yelling, because what was going on? And it blew my mind because, of course, for me it's loud, but if you want to explain it, there you go, you have something to explain. It was loud. You don't say it is loud, no, it was loud. You say that the people were yelling because the bustling of the motorbikes and the donkeys doing stuff, whatever, you go on with that, right? And you explain that outside of the frame that you were saying, in a way that with a sense that you cannot use in photography, for example, which is the sound, right? Or the smell,
Right.
the sense of smell. And I thought that was brilliant.
And because, even yeah, just especially, you're going to use Morocco as an example, where you can still tell the truth of what, somewhere like the Medina in Marrakesh is like, right? They have, they're known for having donkeys, and for, lots of different animals, and lots of different types of shops. And so you can still describe the truth of that, but to you it was really loud. And so the loud is the subjective part of it, but then you can use those, get much more detailed in, how people are talking to each other, and what's in the background, to then still describe objectively and, truthfully, what makes up that city. And so you're starting to paint that picture of something that is very true and factual, but your experience with it is what's subjective.
Yeah, it becomes super powerful. I want to go back a little bit to the beginning, which you were saying about sending emails, for example, or filling grants and things like that. And we will. There's someone asking questions, so we will get to that in a minute. But one of the things that I try to propose to members and to anyone that attends to a workshop or something like that is the idea of being a professional. Not in the sense maybe in which you have to work for a magazine or anything like that, but if you want to do it well, I mean, I'm talking in the context of doing it well. That's what I mean when I say professional, right? Which the framework of that would be that you have to understand how to send an email, for example, to someone, how to connect with editors, because everybody wants to do an exhibition, for example, in a gallery. Everybody wants to have their own book. So no one wants to stay in the Instagram thing. Everybody wants to grow farther than that, which is normal, right? So what would be your your suggestion as how to improve, or what's the importance of being able to put together a well made email, for example, or things like that seems a little bit more superficial.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that Micah, being the other side of me, and being the photographer, experiences a lot, just because he pitches, to different places all the time. So I can talk kind of from what I see of his experience, but also from when people email me, and whether it's applying for jobs, or whether they're pitching a freelance story, to our papers. And to me, whether you're writing your actual piece, or whether you're sending that email to try to pitch it somewhere, you always want to think about who your audience is, because you might be able to write a really nice email, but if depending on who you're trying to send to reach out to, and what the medium is, they might call for a different tone in how you're speaking. Of course, you want to have correct grammar and and have all of that. It needs to sound good and very clear. But I think audience in anything you write or anything you do is the most important thing to think about first, because then you can craft whatever you need to write from there. So if you're trying to write an email to a gallery, that you might want to be a little more formal. Or if you are reaching out to someone on Instagram, then that might be shorter and more conversational. But I think so after audience, to me, the biggest thing is just whether you want to make an impact quickly. I have people apply for jobs all the time, and they might have, good resumes and good portfolios, but if those first 2, 3 sentences of an email don't grab my attention, then I might not even really, take a look at a portfolio. So knowing who your audience is and what tone you need to use for that audience is the first thing for me. And then, just like any lead in an article in a newspaper, you need to be able to grab someone's attention immediately so that they want to keep reading, because we all have 1,000 things that we're doing and looking at and trying to decide every day. So how do you pull someone out of that, that kind of mindless, I'm doing 1,000 things a day, and grab their attention so they want to focus on you?
Yeah, that's incredible. So would be reasonable to apply certain storytelling skills if you want some more like fancy narrative features to an email to ask for something, for example, that would be
Mm-hmm.
something that's fine, or it might be a little bit
Yeah,
much.
yeah, I think it depends. I always go through all these different tools and things that you should or shouldn't do, but I think at the end of the day, it's very subjective in what you feel is the best way to get a thought, to get something across. And so that's why we call it a toolbox, right? Is because you don't use every single tool or grammatical option for in every single piece that you write. But I think that it depends on how close you are to the story. So if you have this really crazy experience and that's why you're pitching the story, is because of your connection to it or your access to it, then I think you do start with that, with a kind of a shocking or descriptive way of beginning it. Again, it's how do you get the editors or the readers, how do you get their attention? And so sometimes it may just be, hi, I have all of this experience. I'm reaching out, pitching the story. But sometimes it might be, a couple sentences of painting that picture and of using that kind of descriptive new journalism way to get the reader or the editor engaged.
That's incredible. Are you aware of any trends or hypes or stuff like that in the writing world that you think that are a little bit silly, or it would be okay to, because the first thing that I would do after watching this, if it was not me, because I know you, I can ask you, it would be just to go to YouTube to see writing skills. So someone is asking, for example, Denise Linden is asking, do you have any recommendations for creative writing courses on the web? I think that it says. Um, Before that, if you have any recommendation, would be, is there anything that you believe that it's just a trend? And I've seen in the photography side of it, there's plenty of them that I would recommend to people. Just play with them, but avoid them as soon as you can.
Yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily a specific trend, but again, I think it's just that making sure that you're bringing your human tone to it, and that you are thinking about each piece with that audience in mind, because not every piece, deserves, or um, if you use that kind of flowery description,
Yeah,
it can definitely be overkill if it's something that's not needed, or if you just kind of go overboard. So I think that and that's why, I guess same thing in photography, right? Where you have your own voice, and you look for certain things. You have all of these tools in your arsenal, but really knowing what to use and to what degree, right? Like we've had reporters go against our policies, and we're still trying to develop them. This is probably a whole other conversation. But using AI and chat GPT to not just correct grammar, but to create like a feature style lead for their story.
yeah,
And and it gets to the descriptions there. It describes what's happening, but you can just tell that there was no human decision there in that nuance. And so that might be kind of abstract and not really answering what you were asking, but yeah, I think it's just using using your connection to a story and being, as human and as yourself as possible. That usually comes out in the best way.
All right. Do you have any recommendations for creative writing courses in the web?
Creative writing courses on the web.
Well,
I
the
don't
thing is,
really.
I have to say that we are hosting this amazing
Yeah.
writing and photography workshop in Mexico next month, September, with Kayla as teacher for writing. And this is going to be very hands-on, very similar to what we did in Morocco, but this will be in Oaxaca in Mexico. That would be an option, but if you have any other idea that's a little bit less um, complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that kind of hands-on learning is is great. And I think that's why we do it and why I enjoy doing it. And not to just sell ourselves even more, but but we do, as a Raw Society, we do offer mentorships that are more one-on-one, and not having to travel somewhere if that's not for everyone. But we do offer kind of one-on-one courses, and so like you can work on a specific project, um, and kind of develop those tools, not necessarily as a course where everyone goes through the same thing. Um, but yeah, I think that could apply too.
Yeah, the mentorships that we do
Hmm.
are very cool, and we just added this year the writing mentorship, which is with Kayla, and it's a one-on-one in which you can develop many different things. To me, learning from you is mind-blowing. And you know what? After, um, so you know that we have this exhibition going on in here in Menorca in this museum, and every Thursday is something. Well, every week we go one day to do like a private tour with it. This the moment in which you can talk more in small groups to people and explain yourself and show the exhibition to people in a way that it's a little bit more intimate, and with the hopes that they will buy something, and it works very well. And but every time that we go, there's someone looking at the exhibition. There's people there that they go just to see what's going on. And the other day I was talking with someone with the family that they were about to leave, but we asked them if you guys were going to start this private visit, you can join and all that stuff. Oh, are you the photographers? They say, yeah, we are. And she said the wife of it was, I don't know, wife and husband and their father or something like that it was. And they said, I was looking for your text. So we had the exhibition is pretty big. It's Christelle and I, 107 pictures, it's 2 rooms, it's pretty massive. And we have a few texts um, in a like if they were travel notes, like the the notebook that we use in the on location, which part of it is, but it was enhanced, made narrative for the context of the exhibition. And she told me that that was the thing that was enjoying the most was the text, the stories, right? Because that's what gives you the context. And she said, I'm going to follow your Substack because I love how you write, blah blah. And this is in part because of you, because I never been a good writer until I decided to learn how to do it. And I think that the kind of opportunities that I've got since then, um, you know, even in the context of speaking publicly, some universities invite us to speak in places, to give talks and things like that. That improved because I improved my writing a lot. But I don't know if you are aware of some kind of connection between the way that we write and the way that we speak and explain ourselves vocally, if there is some kind of connection, because I think that there is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I also think, it's less course wise, but I think also just, in the kind of in the same vein of, you're seeing You're looking at outwardly, just reading other good writers and reading other bad writers. If you're wanting to, look up new journalism, there are, well-known writers who develop a style, and then, what it's just a lot of feature writers at newspapers kind of follow the same route. But I think just doing a lot of reading and thinking about it, with that in at the top of your mind, so you're not just reading for the content, but reading good and bad writers or good and bad stories, and then thinking about what makes it good or bad to you. I think there is objectively good writing and there's objectively bad writing, but there's a lot there's a lot in between where someone might like a style or a story or an author, and not like something else. So there's a lot of subjectivity within those extremes. But yeah, I think just thinking about it and consuming work, and thinking, and comparing it to what you do or how you would want to do something.
That's awesome, and I would like to finish with a little bit that in mind, is that the world is big. We tend to hear this, that the world is getting smaller and smaller, and I don't think that that's right. I think that the world is open in a way that it's easier to access to many people, but that doesn't mean that it's small. It means that it's huge, and the kind of access now that we have to find those audiences that are going to enjoy what we have to say, it's great, and it's huge, right? It's just millions of people that you can reach somehow. But of course the trick is that you have to do it well. There's no way around that. And I would suggest to everyone that wants to listen to try to do it well, being with us in the Raw Society, with someone else. I don't really care. I just want people to understand that we have our responsibility with our craft, and we have to try to do it as best as we can, because we are sending, you were saying that we work with memories, so we are archivists almost of the now, and this is what we are sending to the future. People will see that stuff, and some of us will be known by our families, and some people, they will be known by everyone else, or whatever it is. But we are archiving, if that word exists, which I'm not sure, experiences and moments and stories, and that's valuable, and we have to do it well to keep preserving whatever we are interested
in. Yeah, for sure. And I think, just as how, before there was, the only way that people got their news was, on TV from the same journalist every night at the same time, because of the internet, and there's just more mediums and more ways that we can get our word out there. That, like you said, the world is huge, and there's a lot of different types of people who are interested in different types of things. So I think there are more opportunities to have your voice heard, and more ways to get maybe a really specific story or a really specific topic, to get those in front of people who are interested in that very specific thing. And so I think it's just, I think it's, if you're going to do that, I do think there's a duty to do it well, and to tell the truth, right? Again, that's that kind of objective versus subjective, to tell the truth, but maybe from a more human perspective than we were afforded to before.
Yeah, that's the whole point of all of this. So Kayla, thank you very much. I know that you are on the road, and it's incredible that I cannot hear anything what's going on around you. So
that's nice. I'm glad.
That's pretty cool. Thank you everyone else joining. I will have loved a little bit more questions, because this is the kind of moment to do it. But if you guys have any thing, send us an email, especially for the members, that some of you are here and plenty of you will watch it later. And yeah, thank you very much, and see you very soon.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions that y'all think of later.
Big hugs to Micah.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.